All right, Nate. He is Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer at the Big Ten Conference. Welcome to the stage, Nate. You're local to Chicago, right?
I am.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining me for our little fireside chat. So, I wanted to draw on some of the topics we discussed a little bit more generally on the panel, put a microscope on the Big Ten Conference. We're all familiar, some of us are fans, go Northwestern, of the Big Ten Conference, and I want to hear about its path to becoming a multimedia activation platform. Very cool. Leveraging the conference's data, now monetizing the conference's data, working with Snowflake, and other technology partners to make your vision a reality. So let's start with your story. Tell us about yourself.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me here, Zora. Really appreciate it. Nate Schnader, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer at the Big Ten Conference. I worked in consulting for 12 years before getting into sports. So I usually say that that's kind of been my secret weapon. Within sports, one thing that I quickly found when I came there, my consulting work was all around technology, everything from data analytics and customer analytics to cybersecurity and interim CIO and CTO and CISO type roles. I had never worked in the sports industry, and I joke that it wasn't even low-hanging fruit. It was literally watermelons rolling around on the ground. Sports, in a way, and I mean this in the best way, and this is one of the things we love about sports. It's all about tradition, but it's almost like a time capsule that was buried underground, and you just dug it up, and it's the same as it's been. Like nothing changed from what you found in that time capsule. Excuse me. And so, anyways, I came to the conference.
I would also expect that's somewhat self-induced. Like none of us really. There's something nostalgic about the sports industry.
Completely, yeah. And I mean, you heard on this last panel as we're talking about, kind of the give-get with fans or I guess consumers, right, giving their data or what kind of that give-get looks like for a regular brand. It's a little bit different in sports. It's so emotional, right? And you're not necessarily, it's not like, not to call out an industry, but it's not like one dog toy company versus another, right? Where you're going to be really price sensitive. For us, like if you're an Ohio State fan, you're an Ohio State fan. And so it's an emotional connection. It's where you went to undergrad. It's where you maybe met your significant other, your spouse. You got your first job out of there potentially, and so it is rooted in who you are. I mean, you identify clearly very much with Northwestern, right? How many times have we kind of mentioned that here?
I probably went to Ryan Field one time when I was in
right. Well, but you know what I mean, right?
Yes, I do.
And so, anyways, in 2020, Commissioner Warren, who's now the president and CEO of the Chicago Bears, former Commissioner Warren brought me in day 5 when he was at the conference. He quickly realized that we were doing nothing. We didn't know anything about our customers whatsoever. We weren't really thinking in terms of technology at all. And we're talking like, when I say technology, like the cloud was something that produced rain, for the most part at the conference. So we had a ton of technical debt that we needed to overcome. We didn't know anything about our fans. And then secondly, that was right around the time that the pandemic hit. And what we quickly realized is we've been relying on sports are going to be played no matter what happens, right? So the idea that all of a sudden sports maybe wouldn't be played, it really exposed that we have one really key revenue stream, and it's just media around are we playing the sports or not. And so we quickly started realizing, one, we need to learn more about our fans, right? And like what makes them tick, how can we be more intentional? But two, we need to also start thinking about diversifying some of our revenue streams. And so those are like the 3 buckets I was really brought in to start leading.
Yeah, so tell us about that. What exactly do you do for the Big Ten Conference?
So as the CIO, it's kind of a deceiving title, but it's kind of all of the technology infrastructure. So that's everything from cybersecurity to even just like the ability to work remotely, which we didn't really have in 2020, which I know seems shocking at this point in time. But really my largest initiative is around customer data. So we really went at the conference, if you were kind of looking at this from like a crawl, walk, run on our fans, we were asleep on the couch. I mean, that would be like the best way to put it. Traditionally, we couldn't have told you when I got there whether or not someone had come to one of our events, our championship events, or purchased merchandise from us, gone to our website in 125 years. It was something that was definitely shocking when I got there. So One of our biggest avenues was forming a business strategy and intelligence division. We've deployed a modern data stack, really built around Snowflake and using insights from companies like Verisk.
Wonderful. So you mentioned transaction information, kind of team affiliation. What other consumer insights and why are fan insights, consumer insights important to the Big Ten Conference?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, traditionally, I think it's allowed us to be a little bit complacent on not needing to know that because people continue to show up at events. But the truth is, and I think you heard the panel talking about this with the younger fan and how really fan affinity is changing, the way that maybe traditionally myself or someone who's older than me wants to they're okay with sitting on a couch and kind of letting the game come to them. We had Paramount up here. The games are changing, so you might have games now on Peacock or on other streaming platforms. Some fans, the younger fans, may not even want to ever show up in the venue. And so we need to start thinking about how do we start tailoring the experience to the younger fan base. That's like the sustainability of our business, of sports. And I always think about this idea of, when I was growing up, I was brought to a Chicago Cubs game with my dad. And so for me, that has an emotional tie, and I'll bring my kids to those games. But if our future kids and their kids aren't being brought to those games and being in the actual facility doesn't matter anymore, that changes the sustainability of the sport and the way that we actually approach these fans. So knowing the fans, this can be as simple and transactional as should we, when Northwestern's in town or for our championship, if they're in our championship game, should we have red wine versus beer or whatever it is, right? How do we actually get more intentional with the experience, not only in the venue, but then also 95% of our fans are never going to step foot in a venue, period. So how do we actually meet them where they are all over the country and all over the world? We might host a game in Dublin, and that might just be because the sponsor paid the most to be there. But there were no insights that led us to actually host that game in Dublin. And I think that that's the change in thinking that we're trying to get to.
So you walked into the Big Ten in 2020, bit of Stone Age. I assume you're getting into this crawl, maybe walk phase. So tell us kind of where you're headed, and tell us about Boost as well, please.
Absolutely. So the third realm, I guess, of my job besides the customer insights is, and this was kind of more of the diversify revenue, is start to look at some of the problems that we have. And start thinking about the concept of partnering or even building. It's almost like forming your own little corporate incubator, if you will. So Boost, the reason that this came about is we had formed this modern data stack. We were starting to understand who our fans were through things like purchases and coming to our events. But we realized the area where fans essentially raised their hands the most to tell us about them was our digital channels. And for instance, our website, big10.org, doesn't even allow us to capture any kind of personal data. Yeah, we have Google Analytics and things like that. It's all aggregated insights. We had no ability to let a user come in, tell us who they were, say who they were a fan of, what games had they attended, what are they interested in seeing. We have 10,000 student athletes, 28 sports, and 14, soon to be 18 schools. There's a lot of differentiation in there. They're not all basketball fans. They're not all football fans. Some are only volleyball fans. We're treating them as fans, right? And very generalized and aggregated, but we were never getting to the one-to-one. And so we quickly realized, okay, this is the area we need very much so to change. So I did a ton of market diligence around kind of the website market and the app market in specifically the collegiate space. There was essentially one provider that had about 95% market share. Again, does not collect consumer data, cannot do anything with it. It's just pure programmatic ads, and there's no intentionality. It's not set up to tell stories, to tell you why you should be watching our women's sports or some of our other interesting storylines. And so what we actually did is we realized, one, we weren't collecting data, and two, we weren't telling the stories, right, that promoted things like our media partners, or why you should be watching Caitlin Clark, who, if anyone is aware, is doing some incredible stuff in the women's basketball realm. She's the Steph Curry of women's basketball, except that doesn't even make sense because she's really the Caitlin Clark of women's basketball, which you can't compare to. And so with that being said, what we did is we went out and realized we need to solve these problems. I found this company who was using, the theme of the day, generative AI, on a rules-based model combined with a large language model in order to start telling stories at scale for all the sports data that's coming in. So as you're maybe going to a live box score, you're going to ESPN, there's a live stream of data coming in. passes and shot makes and misses or tackles. All of that, there's 178 data points going on at all times for a football game, for instance. The amount of stories that can be told that you're not even seeing real time, not just before or after, right? Because some of that stuff is kind of Mad Libs, and you can create this. The amount of data that's there that you can be telling real-time stories and also adding a ton of value to fans, it's immense. We have 28 sports. We can't cover this with humans. We have a team of 5 people that are set up to administer the sports, not to write any stories. And so what we did is we found this group of scrappy entrepreneurs that were doing this for coaches, automating the game planning, the storytelling, the analytics. And I interviewed these coaches. They were like, oh, this is saving us 30 or 40 hours a week. It's like the most important tool that we have. And so I approached this company and said, look, we need to create more content. We need to pair that content with user data to make it relevant and one-to-one storytelling instead of one-to-many. And we need to do it at scale across 28 sports. And so we did a bunch of diligence, proof of concept work, and they knocked it out of the park. And so we formed this entity. It's called Boost. I'm technically the co-president of Boost. And we're set out to be a challenger brand within the collegiate market. We want to tell the stories. It doesn't have to be fully automated, by the way. Can be a co-pilot, right? Let's 80% write the story, and then let's humans do what they do best, which is be creative around that story.
Or humanize it.
Or humanize it. Humanize it, exactly. Yeah. And so that actual company set out not only to do that for the Big Ten Conference, and we're launching the new big10.org later this fall, or I guess this winter at this point. But we also are huge believers and evangelists of the modern data stack, and how, one of the biggest things I found as I'm assessing our issues was we had no ability to really staff up or to understand what tools we needed by who we had in-house. So if you look at most of these schools or most of these professional teams or leagues, they're these huge brands, but they've mostly outsourced all of their direct-to-consumer relationships. And so they've never really had anyone on staff that's had to think about putting all that together and then managing the D2C side of this. And so one other thing that Boost does that I hear this from tons of these different teams and leagues is, hey, we don't even know where to start. And what we really want is just the best set of data and insights to be delivered directly to our tools and then sync right back, just kind of create this flywheel. So one other thing that Boost does besides like this modern platform and the content is we do modern data stack as a service type solution. So we're working with a number of different professional teams as well as colleges where we're deploying these solutions and bringing things like the power of the data appends that we get through something like Verisk, but also all the investment that's going into something like the Data Cloud with Snowflake. And so we're essentially allowing them to have all that power, but without having to invest in the tools and the know-how in the team.
So I think I have one more question for you. Our time is coming to an end as well, but I guess who are you rooting for in the Big Ten is my last question.
Now,
who are dying to know.
I'm technically not supposed to be rooting for anyone. Obviously, as I said, we're about to have 18 teams. But I went to Indiana University. So if there just so happens to be an Indiana game on, especially if they're playing someone else outside the Big Ten, I'm really rooting for them. But yeah, Indiana.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, well, that's an awesome story. One all of us will keep up with professionally and also as fans. Nate, thank you so much for letting me shine a bit of a spotlight on you. Audience, let's give Nate a big round of applause. Let him get off the stage.